Hello, everyone. Welcome to my very messy apartment. It is Sunday at unfortunately like noon, and unfortunately, I did wake up about an hour ago. So I figured I would take you guys on this little self publishing journey with me. If you don't know, I am self publishing a sapphic romance novel, and I think realistically, the timeline for this is like I'm giving myself at most a year. But I am doing the final edits now. I'm also posting chapter by chapter the final ish draft on my Patreon, so people can get early access to it. And I am getting critique from my lovely critique partner, Tegan, who, shout out to Tegan, she is amazing. I will link her handle on here. She found me through my last YouTube video, and we have been swapping manuscripts, doing critique. So take it from me, you don't need to be a big YouTuber on here to like find community and find people. There was also somebody who reached out to me about doing cover art. Like, it's really cool what can happen when you just like make videos and put yourself out there. So I have been looking at Tegan's feedback. It's been really, really helpful so far. And hopefully, I am also giving her good feedback on her project. She's doing a really cool, like, queer Renaissance festival book, and it's just a lot of fun. Um, so, yeah, I first of all want to make some breakfast because even though it is noon, I haven't eaten yet. I'm gonna make some breakfast potatoes, gonna make some coffee. But I'll also first talk a little bit about where I am in the state of critique. So actually, let me move because I'm holding my camera up right now and my arm hurts. Okay, that's a little better. So where I am right now in terms of critique. I have edited the first two chapters with Tegan's suggestions. Luckily, because I am on like really, really close to a final draft, most of the suggestions are just like, stronger setting here or point of clarification here or things that are pretty easily fixable. But consistently, the one larger part of her feedback has been that it's difficult to understand the external stakes for my main character, Melody. And that is something that I'm aware of, but it's interesting to see it through a reader's perspective because Melody is a character who is very similar to me. If you've heard me talk about this book before, you know this is like a coming of age, trying to come out of the closet as a lesbian type of romance, and based, very strongly on when I was also trying to come out of the closet as a lesbian. Um, and I feel like the external stakes for Melody are there, they do exist, but they kind of start getting hinted at in chapter 6, and then they come really strongly in chapter 8. So, it did just kind of make me realize, like, going through the first, like, 5 chapters or so, you really don't understand why Melody is so afraid, like, what she's so afraid of, and why she is taking this deal to fake date a man she's never met and lying about it to her friends, for the sake of remaining closeted. Um, and I think Tegan is right. That does, like, not come across very strongly, and kind of add to one, point of confusion, and two, it makes you dislike Melody a little bit because she's like lying to her friends. And I have been trying to brainstorm since I saw Tegan's comments about how much of this I even want to make clear in the beginning. I do think I want to make it stronger in the beginning what the external stakes are, but I do also kind of like the slow reveal a little bit of like what's going on with Melody and why she's so afraid. She's a character who is very, very strongly driven by fear. And a lot of that stems from her family, and her mom in particular, which again, we don't really start learning until like chapter 6, 8. Until then, her mom is just kind of like an annoying character. But yeah, I don't know if you would necessarily read her mom as dangerous if you don't have like, the full knowledge of the story, obviously, that I had writing it. But I want to make that clearer, I think, in the first phone call that Melody has with her mom in the second chapter. So that's part of what I think I'm going to be working on today. I think from what I saw in the comment activity, Tegan's gotten up to like chapter 6 maybe with her comments. So I'm gonna go through 3 through 6 today, look at the new comments she's made, brainstorm what I can do, make the easy fixes, and then if there's anything that requires more of a significant fix, I will be going and fixing that as well, or making a plan on how to fix it. So yeah, making the external stakes clearer for Melody. I did also want to talk about, I think it's interesting because lack of stakes is like a very common critique I get across all of my works, like not just this one, like most fiction that I write, people give me critiques like I don't understand what's at stake for the character, like what happens if they lose. And I think that's because I tend to write characters who are like doing this to themselves. Like it is their choice to not act or to act in a way that is harmful to them. And I that was kind of important to me, like telling Melody's story, because I was like, her band manager is not explicitly against her coming out if she were to come out. Her fans are in support of, the band's queerness. There would be negative reactions from some camps for sure, but overall, it wouldn't be a very negative reaction if she were to come out from like the band and her manager and her friends, right? But um, what I did want to get across is that she has such a negative past and like so much trauma in her past that she is still holding on to that fear. So that's the first part of it. My cat is playing with a battery right now on the floor. Um, the second part of it is that Melody and her mom, you can skip ahead if you don't want like spoilers about the book, but Melody and her mom are kind of in like a catch-22 situation where Melody is sending money back home so that her mom can take care of her little brother. And hopefully live somewhere nicer. They come from like a really really poor lower class background. Um, so Melody's sending like large chunks of her paycheck home every month, and um, Melody's mom needs the money, right? So on one hand, like Melody's mom can't just like completely cut her out if something goes wrong or if she, comes out and the mom has a negative reaction to that. But at the same time, Melody is scared enough that she would get cut out of her mom's life entirely and therefore her brother's life. And she really, really cares about her little brother. And that is like a really strong thread that goes through the entire book is Melody and her little brother. So I think really what I need to do in developmental editing is just make that clearer from the beginning. I think maybe like add a line in the first phone call about how like the mom is kind of withholding Melody's access to her little brother, not letting her talk to him on the phone, because it is implied that once her journal leaks, those lyrics are about Kai, and it's kind of like a punishment, like you can't talk to your brother because you are acting out in public or being seen as queer in public. And I think that's really probably the strongest external stake for Melody, so I want to make that clearer. And that's really probably my main developmental goal in like the first act. Everything else is like just more easy fixes, like setting detail, grounding the characters more strongly, clearing up a couple points of confusion, whatever it might be. So that's what I'm going to work on. I'm going to make some coffee, make some potatoes, and then I'll do some nice aesthetic, probably not very aesthetic. I'll do some B-roll of me actually writing. So we'll see how far I get with that today. And also, I am going to give some critique to Tegan as well. Again, shout out to her. She's really, really fantastic. And I'm trying to get through I'm trying to pace myself. So maybe like 20, 30 pages of her manuscript per day. So yeah, those are my plans. All right, so I have my coffee, not my potatoes yet. Those are still in the oven. But I did just want to take a minute and read through Tegan's feedback while I'm waiting for those potatoes, um, so that I can have a good plan in place of what I actually need to accomplish in this editing session. I know I talked about it a little bit, but I am, like I said, posting chapters on my Patreon. And while I don't expect the version that is going up on my Patreon to be like 100% accurate to the final published draft, I do obviously want it to be as good as possible for the people that are paying for my Patreon. So I am posting chapter 4 tomorrow, and luckily, Tegan has left me some comments on chapter 4, so I can address those comments before I get it up for my patrons tomorrow. And that'll be good going forward, just so that I have, like, each chapter that I post on my Patreon edited to the best level it can possibly be. I'm sure after I finish doing the critique edits, I probably will still give it to like one more reader, just because I'm like really, really nitpicky and a huge perfectionist and also terrified about the reception of this book. So I want it to be like as good as possible before I publish it, obviously. Um, so let me go ahead and find draft. I'm pretty sure I read through all of her comments last night in my email, but just in case I missed any, let's see. This is my cat Pepper. If you watched my old videos, um, my kitten Noodle ran away, which was so sad. Literally, he ran away in the middle of a blizzard, like one of the coldest Minnesota winters we've had in like a long time. Um, So I have Pepper now, and I had given up hope for Noodle, but this is just like a life update. He actually has been found again, and he hasn't been caught yet, but he is like running around downtown, and I keep getting updates and like pictures of people who have been seeing him, and they're like, he's jumping on top of cars by the liquor store. He ran into the woods. I'm like, okay, cool, great. So hopefully I can get Noodle home soon. He is out there. It's crazy. He like got so much bigger. He looks pretty healthy, even though we've gone through like literally like negative 20-degree weeks and like blizzard after blizzard. But this is Pepper. She's a year old. She was a barn cat who had a pretty traumatic life. Um, and she is much happier now that she's here. She's a little spooky, isn't she? She's so cute though. Anyway, let me read this feedback. I really love this one comment. Just says gay, lol. uh, Okay, so I have finished reading all of Tegan's comments, and I did look at all of them last night. There weren't any that I missed. There are a couple things that I needed to remember to go back and edit. One of them is the girls have a Madison Square Garden concert that was like a later draft revision that I just decided like they should be performing at Madison Square Garden. They're like a huge band. And Tegan was like, we should know about this earlier. Like we should know that this is coming up. And I'm like, yeah, we definitely should. That's something that I knew too when I edited it in, because it was just like a last minute, oh, maybe they should go to Madison Square Garden in chapter 8. But yeah, that's definitely something that should be mentioned way earlier, than chapter 7, 8. So that's another developmental thing ish that would be easy to include, but just needs to be threaded through a little bit more. And then I did read through again her full comment on Melody's internal stakes, and that is actually a little bit different than what I was talking about earlier, because it's more Yeah, I do feel like, hmm, maybe I do need to think about that more. So I'm going to spend more time thinking about that. Um, but really, what Tegan is saying, like, is that she wants to see Melody's internal justification, whatever it is, on the page for why she's not telling the girls. Um, and that's another thing I wanted to talk about too in my editing process is I feel like when I started my MFA, I am in my going into my third year soon of my MFA in creative writing, and I feel like when I started my MFA, we were talking a lot in my classes about these like really minimalistic type of stories where it was like all you get is like the action and the dialogue, and it is up to the reader to interpret everything else. And I kind of started like trying to write or edit more that way, where I was like, okay, maybe I am like spelling things out too clearly to the reader. But I don't think that's really my style. I think I really love writing internal dialogue, and I would call myself like pretty good at writing internal dialogue. Um, but I think I ended up editing too much of it out during that time period to the point where now it's hard to understand why these characters are making the choices that they're making because we don't see enough of their like thought processes and their justification to themselves. So that's what I need to put back in after I think more about why exactly she isn't telling the girls and what the internal stakes are for that. I think that's a really great point that Tegan brought up. So I'm gonna write and I'm gonna eat my potatoes and I'm gonna drink my coffee. And I will show you maybe 2 to 3 clips of those things. So have fun. Okay, so this is an odd position, I know. um, but I have been editing for about 30 minutes and I just wanted to tell you guys where I'm at. I'm not entirely done, but I did make a lot of changes so far. Not a lot, a lot. It's good because Tegan didn't have like again like a whole lot of like changes that are going to take a long time to do. It's more just like, okay, let me clarify this point. Let me think more about like the logic chain here, things like that, which are usually pretty quick and easy fixes, especially because I have been thinking about this story and reading the story over and over again for so long. I usually know how to fix it. Um, so I've done a lot of those changes. And in terms of Melody's internal justification, what I realized is, and this is something I already kind of knew about my writing, but I'm realizing it more and more with the more feedback I get, is a lot of times I will have like these one or two like really pretty sounding but kind of vague lines in like the internal dialogue where she's like, I just can't do it, or something like that. I don't know, like more poetic than that, but like, okay, sorry, I had to switch my camera, but anyway, so I'll have these kind of like pretty but vague lines in the internal dialogue, and they sound really nice, but then when you read them and when you think about them, you're like, okay, but why? Like, what is she actually saying here? What is she actually thinking? And that is usually where I just need to be more explicit on the page and like go deeper and more clearly into what is actually happening instead of just like leaving those like little pretty nice vague lines of dialogue or whatever there. So I think that can be kind of the problem with writing like clean drafts or writing not to brag, not to brag, but I feel like I am able to construct pretty good sentences, but that can hide like developmental issues, and that is usually what I find when I'm editing and when I'm getting feedback is like, okay, this sounds nice and it reads really nice, but like what does it actually mean? Or like have you thought more about how these things connect and like the justification for this and the characterization and stuff like that. And that I feel like is usually where I actually need to spend more time rather than just like the sentence level because my sentences I think are pretty decent. But anyway, so that is part of what I'm doing. I still haven't edited that part of chapter 2 with the conversation with her mom, but I'm going to do that. And it was really cool to hear because Tegan loved chapter 5, like almost no notes on chapter 5. And chapter 5 is Kai's perspective, who is the love interest in my story. Every 5 chapters, we get like a short perspective from Kai. and I love Kai's perspective so much. I love writing in Kai's perspective. Maybe it's like easier for me too because she's less like close of a character to me. Like it is somebody that I'm just like entirely fabricating. Whereas my main character Melody is like pretty close to me, so sometimes that can be difficult to untangle. That also, this is just like a point. I'm gonna have like a couple points in this last little section, but that also brings me to something I saw last night. I'm not gonna name the creator, mostly because I can't even remember or think of his name right now. But I just saw something on TikTok where this guy was like, um, a lot of times your first book is just therapy, and you got to think about like, is this a book you actually want to share with the world, or is it just something you need to work through on your own? He's not the first person I've heard say that. I have heard a lot of people say that. But I disagree. And maybe this is because a large portion of what I write is um, like personal essays and nonfiction essays. Like a large portion of what I write is like memoir type stuff. That's what I'm doing my thesis in. And I think that like when you are writing to work through a personal issue or personal trauma or memories, like a lot of times for me, that is the writing that I most like to read. And it is the writing that I think makes me feel the most when I write it. Um, and I think you do still have to like be able to separate it out from you enough that you can still work with the story and, turn the characters into their own people and turn the story into its own thing. But I don't know. We've been talking a lot in my nonfiction class. We read this essay from Melissa Febos, who love Melissa Febos, but she was talking about how a lot of male writers and writing critics, and this is not specifically to diss on this guy who made the TikTok again, because I don't even know who he was, and people say this all the time. He was talking about himself too, like his own book he thinks was too therapy-ish for himself. Um, but a lot of male critics specifically will look down on like navel gazing and like talking too much about your own issues and your own past and your own, need to self therapize and whatever. And a lot of times that feeds into like a very misogynistic critique of literature and a very misogynistic view of literature because it's, thinking that trauma is not valuable to write about or that this is just something for you. You should not be sharing it with other people. But as somebody who writes specifically queer literature, I think that writing through things that you have gone through in your life are very valuable for other people to read because we have so many shared experiences as a culture, and just writing about things that have happened to you and things that are, true in some way, even if it's in fiction, like you're pulling on experiences that are universal, or even if not universal, like are shared by a lot of people and will help other people to read and recognize that for themselves and recognize those situations in their life and help them work through it as well. So I don't know. I disagree with like the some books are just for you or some stories are just for you because I think like the first draft maybe just for you, but once you've edited it, once you've like tightened up the story and made sure it reads well and that it makes sense on its own and stands apart from you, like I think writing about your personal experience is one of the most important things you can do. So that's just my 2 cents. You don't have to agree, but I did want to talk about that because I saw somebody on TikTok talking about it. So I'm done pretty much with my critique edits for right now. I'll do more, I'm sure, later. And then I also have to give critique to Tegan, which I'm excited to do. I'm excited to read more of her manuscript. So yeah, this was my little like vlog-ish video for today. And other things that I have maybe coming up, I want to do another line editing video because you guys really liked that one and I enjoyed making it. And I have a lot of editing to do. So I'm sure I'll do more line editing videos coming up. I want to do more like video essay type things. I'm thinking doing one about like the myth of the starving artist or like the idea of the starving artist, and then another one about sapphic romance fiction. So I want to get some of those out. But for today, this is going to be part one, or I guess part two if you count like the self-publishing video as part one. But an early part of my self-publishing journey. I'm going to continue, I think probably weekly, doing updates on like what self-publishing is looking like for me, like what stage I'm at with the draft and with marketing and publishing and all of that. I want to try and help people like follow along with the step-by-step journey so you can figure out how you can do it too if you want to, if that's something that you're interested in. So that is about all of my updates. I am again releasing chapter 4 of Crush on my Patreon tomorrow on Monday. And if you'd like to follow along, you can. The first 3 chapters are free, everything else is $3 a month to get access to that and behind the scenes content and, my personal author's notes and deleted scenes and fan art and all that type of stuff. So, yeah, if you want to join the Patreon for free, and get like the free snippets and stuff, that would be really helpful and help me out. So either way, I will see you guys in the next self-publishing update next week. Thank you so much for watching and have a good rest of your day wherever you are.